Welcome to Horowhenua TV and our very first Let's Chat session. I'm Dave Hill, former General Manager of the Horowhenua Chronicle. Horowhenua Television Trust is made up of a group of local volunteer filmmakers and documentary makers interested in presenting short interviews with prominent people in our district. A sort of who's who and what's happening in our part of the world. We have here in the studio a very important person in the Horowhenua, and that's our local Horowhenua District Mayor, Michael Feyen. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for giving up your time. I know you're a very, very busy man. We appreciate this.
Oh, no worries at all. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Thank you. We'll go right back to the very beginning. Whereabouts were you born, Michael?
Well, I was born in Palmerston North, which is where my parents lived after they immigrated from Holland to New Zealand in the early 50s. So I grew up in Palmerston North and started working in Palmerston North as well as an apprentice electrician on the railways. 1974, yeah.
Wow. So how far did you get in that profession?
Well, I stayed with the railways for 9 years. I got my ticket and stayed with them. I went into signals, but during that time, during that 9 years, I probably spent about 2 to 3 of those years away overseas.
So if there's any problems at the council, like a light bulb blows or something, you're the man that replaces it, is it?
Well, I know how to do that, but I mean, probably the last house I wired up would probably be in the vicinity of 35 years ago.
Things have changed a bit since then.
Yeah, well, they have. Then there came a stage where you had to maintain your ticket, so I just let it lapse because I just wasn't doing it. 9 years, if that was enough.
Okay, so you left that and you decided to join the police force.
Yes, well, prior to getting my apprenticeship, I was a school failure, so I got no school exams. Went to the police and they said, well, no, you haven't got any qualifications, get a trade and be worldly. Mm-hmm. So that's why I did the trade, which everybody did if they'd failed at school back then, was a trade. And I went overseas, and when I came back, applied for the police on the basis that I'd done what they asked me to do.
And how old were you then?
25.
So what made you decide to join the police force?
Well, funnily enough, I always saw the police as a social good, so that's not funny because they are a social good, but I saw it as a form of social work really, because due to the range of things you do in that job, you really have to have those skills. Like, it could be like you're informing a family that a loved one's just died in a fatal road accident, for example, or a child has committed suicide, or all of those sorts of things. You have to have some sort of understanding and compassion for. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So
where did you go in New Zealand in the police force? You would have been posted around quite a bit.
No, not really. But I was in Palmerston North mainly as a street cop, but also was a baton instructor. So I would teach police how to use the PR24s, which are the batons with the handle on them, when they were introduced, and teach self-defence and riot control and those sorts of things. But in my whole police career, I never even actually hit someone with a baton. So,
right. just as an aside here, how do you feel about police being armed?
Well, they have so much protective equipment on now that it seems to me they're barely able to move. When you have a look at the mace spray and just the whole way they're rigged up now. Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't been in. I left the police in 1991. So in my day, all you had was the baton that went down in a pocket in your pants, down beside your leg, and the PR24 and handcuffs. That was it. I think that today's society, where so many things have changed, especially with these types of things, and the volatility of people is a lot higher these days. I think the police are probably on the right path. We're not a nation yet where every time somebody goes to something that they pull a firearm, like America, so it hasn't reached that stage that I've observed here in New Zealand.
And tell us about your career in the police force. How high did you rise, rank-wise?
Well, I went from Palmerston North. I didn't go for ranks at all, but from Palmerston North, because I was a baton instructor, that allowed me to go on many things, like on details, working with, looking after Princess Di and Prince Charles, the Queen a number of times, the Pope, I think that was around 1985, different rugby events around post 1981. When England came over here to play, they were expecting problems. So I was at John Kirwan's first test and didn't see the try though because we're facing the crowd. So travelled around a lot. Oh, and with especially with bikies, shadow patrols. So you would follow gangs around the country to make sure that they didn't cause any problems in towns they were passing through and the like. Then I transferred to Pahiatua, where I did 3 years over there, and you usually worked on your own. There was 3 policemen and a sergeant there, so you did your night shifts and everything else like that. So I did country station. I also did 6 months in Dannyburg, so it's a whole different form of policing there, and really enjoyed those experiences there as well. I guess the only downside to it was occasionally you go to massive brawls and you thought, well, I'm going to be getting a hiding here because you're on your own. Yep. Always takes a while for backup. And the other thing is you've always got to, you really have to be thinking on your feet when you're like that, when you're on your own.
You mentioned before you were on the protection squad with royals, for instance, yes, and the Pope. Did you have any interaction with those people?
Well, when Princess Di and Prince Charles were here, we were pretty much all planted around the gardens at Government House in Auckland. So I would have been as close as to you away at times, but remembering that there were numerous other police there as well. So back in that day, it was to make sure nobody got into Government House. So yeah, you get close to them, but it's not like you have a conversation with them. Yeah. And with the Pope, the Pope easily drew out the biggest crowds I've ever seen. The Auckland Domain, the QE2 Park in Christchurch, the Renoff Centre, it's known as now, down in Wellington, and that is where I saw the biggest congregation of nuns I'd ever seen. It was, and I went to a Catholic school and was taught by nuns. I had never seen anything like it in my life with so many in one place.
Well, I didn't think there were that many in New Zealand.
Well, back then, I guess, because I'm sure that was around 1985. So that was the Polish Pope.
Oh, yeah.
That came over. So you got a lot of interesting experiences by travelling around. I really did enjoy that side of the job.
So what made you leave?
Well, I got an injury and just decided that it was time to go. I could have rehabilitated as a physical injury, but I used that. I thought, nah, I've seen enough. There were aspects of the policing I didn't like that were happening. That is a little bit was sort of like, because the MOT was joined with the police then. And so, of course, MOT, their job was to nail everybody they could. They were basically an income stream.
As we thought, yeah.
And the way I saw policing going is you almost had to try and keep up by pretty much issuing a warning to anybody for anything to keep the stats up for the need for extra police. Just a number of things that happened, and I just felt, no, I'll move on. You see very many things in the police that don't ever leave your mind. It doesn't mean you don't think about it all the time, but when you go to fatalities of any description, suicides, these sort of major things where life is lost, that stays with you. There are many fun aspects to the police as well, so it most certainly wasn't all bad. In fact, it wasn't bad at any stage.
You say that you deal with a lot of emotion and stress. Does that affect you later in life?
I think that it shows that, like modern day policing, now they have all sorts of services available for people in the police or the services because they go to certain things. Christchurch would be a good example of that with the recent murders of 51 New Zealanders down there. Those sort of things, the people that see that and confront that now have specialist backup services. We could go to something really horrific and then just the norm was to go back to the station and have a cup of coffee and your lunch. And there was nothing to assist with anything really, only the camaraderie of those that were with you. And usually it wasn't everybody on shift. If you attended, say, a fatal accident or something, it was usually just the two of you that were in the car. Or there might be another car come along if there was need for traffic management, you know, while the site's being cleaned up. Because everything has to be done with such detail as well, because they are always coroner's cases.
Okay, so you left the police force, and what did you get into then?
So I decided to use my opportunity to lay to rest my past of being a school failure. So I went to Massey University and I was about 34, and I did a social work degree, which was a 4-year degree, and I was awarded a first class honours and a Massey scholarship to do a PhD.
So did you become a social worker then?
Well, I've always seen everything I do as social work. So in the true sense, no, because I started a business called Footprints, which quickly morphed into, so that was going to be just a tourism, show tourists around type of thing, the Asian market. But it turned into, I got a phone call from Westpac one day and they said, oh, do you do team building, staff development? I said, yeah, that's our core business. Oh, well, we've got 80 staff. And I said, well, where would you like it done? Martinborough. Okay. What's your budget? They told me, and I said, I'll get back to you with a proposal tomorrow. So I hung up the phone. I said to my wife, what the hell is team building? And but being inventive people, I created a program and the right sort of people to help us out on it. We got that job, and then the phone never stopped ringing for a number of years.
Fantastic. Really great.
So it was all about recreational team building, not sitting around a table holding hands or falling back on a whole lot of people that are going to catch you and you trust. We did everything from parachuting, skydiving,
really,
caving, jet boating, sheep shearing, bulldozer confidence courses, blindfold quad riding, all really, really outrageous stuff, all safe.
A lot of physical stuff, but a lot in
that
yours as
everybody
well.
could do.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you might have one in your group, in which I did commonly with one group, she had no limbs. So a torso on a chair. And she was involved in everything we did, obviously to a differing degree. But everything I did, it didn't matter whether you were skinny, obese, conservative, liberal, old, young, fit, unfit. The programs I arranged meant 100% participation.
And obviously very successful.
Yes, it was really, really successful, and it morphed into organising full conferences and then doing big theme events, and even doing citywide parties on New Year's Eve for Palmerston North, those sorts of things. So kapahaka, all sorts of stuff.
Tell us a little bit about your family. You mentioned briefly your wife. When did you meet?
Yeah, well, I'm not with her, and that's one of the biggest losses. Oh. Well, it is the biggest loss of my life. But I married Janice in 1980. Those were in the days where, well, I was 22 and Janice was 19. You know, that's how it was in those days.
Young, yes.
Yeah, young, and my transition from the railway to the police happened very shortly after I got married. I have 3 children, aged 36, 32 and 30. So that's girl, boy, girl. And very, very proud of them. And they live in, my oldest daughter lives in Hastings, Annika, and she is what do you call that again? Teachers, preschoolers.
Okay, kindergarten.
Yes,
teacher.
yes,
Yeah.
and she has 2 children. They're my only grandchildren, and aged 4 and 2. And yeah, and I have 2 brothers that live in Napier.
Great. All right, we'll move on to, you've done a little bit of this before, obviously. You present well on camera, and you've done television documentaries and also some other work, I believe, for Television New Zealand as well.
It was in 2000, the end of 2000, Janice, my wife at the time, she said, oh, there's an ad in the paper about something. I never really heard it. I thought it was to foster a child for a while, you know. And but as it turned out, it was she had applied for the opportunity to be what they called the Pioneer House family. They were looking for a family that would live 100 years ago, as they did in Auckland, and you dress like that, you live like that. Long and short of it is that we got a phone call pretty quickly and said we were down to the last 8 couples, that they had 8 couples, and they would like to send the director, and they would send a camera person along, and they wanted to interview the family. So they came to our house in Palmerston North and did that. And as they were leaving, the camera woman said to me, I think you're going to be the ones. And so what happened then was they said, look, we'll let you know early next week what our decision is. And so we just took off to the beach for the weekend, but we got rang up in 6 hours. They had a talk on the plane and decided it was going to be the Feyen family from Palmerston North. It was a life changer.
I remember watching that.
Well, as it turns out, it's the 5th most watched television program in New Zealand history. It
was fascinating.
It was the first reality TV program.
So you lived as early pioneers?
Yes, we did, but we were under the belief that it was like a historical documentary. But it was in fact a reality TV program. It was both. And what we're really proud of is that they never in any instant got any arguing or turmoil or anything like that, which is what reality TV programs are. But we'd decided as a family that we just weren't going to do that. We were going to have a roof over our head. We had heating and we had food, so we didn't really have anything to argue for. 12 weeks.
How long? 12 weeks like that. Was it hard?
I think it was more harder leaning up to it, and maybe a bit of a concern about how you'd be portrayed, because you can cut and paste any film as you want, as you know.
Because you would have had cameras there constantly all around you.
Yeah, not constantly. I'd say 50% of the time, but they had in-house cameras that you would go and speak to. Everybody had to do that once a day for 5 minutes. But they were certainly there a significant amount of time. I remember one night there was a knock on the door, which was very unusual, and because I always felt about midnight at 8 o'clock in those places. And it was Julie Christie, who owned the organisation that was filming it, and she said, we want some more drama. We want, we want this, this and this. And I said, well, Julie, what's the ratings? And she said, well, they're just sky high. And I said, don't you think it might be that New Zealanders just don't actually like watching people argue all the time? It's get on and do it. And I think that's why you've got the amount of people watching it, because it's actually a positive show, and we're covering all of the aspects of life of that time. I'm absolutely proud of my family for...
It's the same analogy with Coronation Street. My wife's a big fan of Coronation Street, but they've changed the writing now, where it's more argumentative, more confrontational, and what's happened to the ratings? They've dived right down.
Yeah, and they will, because God knows you see enough of it on the news.
You do.
And I always say,
council.
Kiwis meant to have that number, are meant to have that number 8 wire. If I wasn't here, I'd probably give you a slapping. No, I'm just joking. But it led to other things. It changed our lives, there's no question about that. And because it's run a couple of times a year still, the whole series, you always know when you see older people, that sort of thing, and you think, oh, the program must be on again. I think they've run it for it. Yes, we got paid the equivalent of my police salary. It was most definitely not done for the money. And I'm sure if we were able to dig out the old contract, they must have to pay us for the amount of times they've used it, because boy, they've had good fun with it. And it's been used in schools a lot too for social studies, and because it was everything was positive. We undertook everything. I think it was harder on us because in reality in 1901 in Auckland, you didn't go walking for 3 k's to go shopping. They had carts that would come around with the bread or groceries and these sorts of things. And so dressed in the gear that we were in the heat wave that happened in Auckland at that time, it was hard yakka in that sense. The clothing was very, very hard yakka. I always remember going to the back door early in the morning and standing there, and I only had pants on, and I don't even know if I had a top on. I was pulling the braces back like that, adjusting myself a little bit, and I look up and there's 20 people on the fence line looking over the back fence.
Where was it filmed?
It was filmed in Grey Lynn, so pretty much at the confluence of the Great North Road where it meets Karangahape Road.
Oh, okay.
But the other work that I've, after that, I had a couple of agents saying, oh look, we wouldn't mind you on the books, so managed to get into a number of TV adverts, and I've been quite often on posters around the country, billboards. One that's run a long time is on the Cycle Safe Dad of New Zealand, so those billboards have been up for 5 years around the country. So I find all of that interesting. A lot of the other stuff have just been adverts, but I've really liked that because of watching how everything's pulled together and how they do everything. And there was a program called The Weakest Link, and because I was a celebrity at the time, they had a celebrity weakest link. I really enjoyed being on that set, even though I was voted off first. But I was the only one that got all my questions right and did a banking. But the others all knew each other as celebrities. We'd just finished Pioneer House, so we were flavour of the month. But
they voted you off.
Yeah, and they even said a Spanish word, and they said, the Spanish word is what cartoon character? And I said Mickey Mouse, and everybody went like, he knew that, It seemed to me to be primed to make sure I went off, but I actually got the question right, that one. So, but it was pretty cool. I think it was, Tim Shadbolt was on that, Gary McCormick, the girls from True Bliss, a couple of people from various building programs, and so I just I go for the ride on all of those sorts of experiences. And also a lot of work with, you've got Horowhenua TV here, there used to be Tararua TV, and I've met some of your staff here on doing that. I fronted quite a few regional TV programs doing interviews, quite often on topics that I was just told about. So it's all in the way you ask the question, really, so to drag out their knowledge and not try and make out everything.
So you're obviously a media savvy person, and you front well with media. Yeah, and you've gone on to social media as well, which you put together yourself. What's the reasoning behind that?
Because I can't get any equity time in written media. I've been provided a lot of media for, say, the Manawatu Standard, that's where I live, for years, by the range of things I've done, and it's mostly been really good, provided really good media, and yet I find when it comes to serious matters, I frankly find it disturbing how they're covered. And I'm very supportive of local media, but I think the pressures they have on them to maintain advertising revenue actually dumbs down the stories that go into the press, to be quite frank. Because of not wanting to take any risk of upsetting advertisers. And advertisers are often local government with public notices and adverts that they generally do, printery work, that sort of thing. So it's been a hard road, in my opinion, to get equitable media coverage.
As a former general manager in both radio and print, I do agree with you. I can say that as a former manager.
The social media website, if you don't mind me. All I know is that I've got an iPhone that has lots of apps that I haven't got a clue how to operate, but I was shown how to photograph and film and how to put it on social media. So all I try and do with this is if I see something and think, oh, that's fun, that's interesting, I'll film it, put it up. If I see something that's disturbing, I'll film that and put it up. And that could be anything from a dog attack on somebody, or the way the water's looking in the environment in a certain part, might be the Hokio stream here in Levin or Lake Horowhenua. I try and film events where I'm allowed to film. And so running for mayor this time, I simply have to do what I can on social media, because I already From what I've observed in the media and the way stories are written, I'm on a hiding to nothing there.
So do you find social media very effective?
Frankly, I find social media disturbing. Yeah, I think if it's used right, it's great, but social media, right from the young, you see all the young walking around concentrating on their phone, not even talking to the 10 people they're with. In fact, they could even be talking to one of the other 10 people about one of the other people in the group. Social media bullying is a huge effect on young people, but it can also be, I try to use it really, really positively and try and keep an eye out on all the comments, because what tends to happen with social media is a lot of people take that opportunity to personalise things. So instead of talking about the topic, they attack the person, or shooting the messenger really. And I find that very disturbing. And so I don't like my own personal life on social media. Sometimes my children put up family stuff and I've just got to accept that. They know that I'm not big on it, so they're very careful what they do, and I love them for that. Personally wise, there's very little on my social media.
But having said that, you find it a very effective medium for getting your message across? Or?
Well, I don't think that type of social media gets across to the people that would read the Chronicle.
Yeah.
Which, I'm nearly 62 myself.
Yeah.
But people of an older age than me, and I love to read hard copy. So I like to read a newspaper.
Same.
And not on something like Stuff or something like that. I never go into that. So the local media is read by, I would say, older people, but they're also the ones that vote, and they're also the ones that don't do much on social media.
And a big proportion of the population in the district.
Yes, and while our demographics changing, so a lot of the older people that have come from the cities, selling their house to come here and then have some discretionary income, a number of them seem to be more computer savvy than what I would say the old school local older people in the Horowhenua.
So you mentioned before you're standing for mayor again. The big question, why?
Why? Yep, I ask myself that a lot too.
Well, you must have a vision, aspirations for the district. Tell us about those.
Well, I put a lot of them out. That was my manifesto. I was the only one that actually had one, apart from vote local or re-elect. I actually put out a manifesto.
So what are the main...
Well, one of them's already lost. There is no way in the wide world our social housing should have been sold off. I voted against that. So did Councillor Campbell. The rest of the council saw fit to sell that. That's the democratic process, I suppose. But the reality is that we gave away 115 houses at 47k each. And there's already a number of issues that will come out later on that are occurring for those people in those houses. So also the closure of the dump. Yeah, what you must remember is that there's nobody in the country that thought I would get this mayoralty. Brendan's seat was probably regarded as one of the safest, and had he been re-elected, he would have been the chair of Local Government New Zealand. By me getting in, I didn't realise at the time how much that was going to cause issues for LGNZ and a number of other things, because I believe why I'm in there now is that we actually retain a democratic process, because it's been devolved. We don't even have a Minister of Local Government anymore. That was devolved by Labour government to LGNZ, Local Government New Zealand. That's actually a corporate entity, and that's a buffer between local government and central government. And I think it really needs to be re-looked at.
You mentioned a lot of people thought you didn't have a chance against
Yes.
Duffy. What do you think swung it in your favour?
I think that essentially the treatment that local people were receiving from our council made a lot of people turn. And I think that we are a council that's perceived to have conflicts of interest in very important areas such as development. And it is my opinion that, and any mayor that you'll talk to around the country, that you really can't have a chief executive that's a registered property developer, a deputy mayor who's a major property developer. It's not a good look, it's not a good perception. And, and in that time our council's taken out development contributions, so developers don't even have to pay towards the infrastructural costs of our area. That all falls back on the ratepayer, given that 62% of our population's under the breadline, low income earners, who now can't even afford to rent or buy a house, given our demographic change of well-heeled older people moving to town. We're actually squeezing out our workforce.
All that conflict and trouble that you've had in the first term as a mayor, has it got you down? Has there ever been a point where you thought, why am I doing this?
Yeah, definitely. I've had that, but I've also had the satisfaction of seeing a lot of our financial management changed, improved on, not fast enough, but it's happening by having an independent finance audit and risk chair. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the fact that submitters get listened to. I was very proud of the fact that live streaming on Facebook, in fact that proved so popular, we were getting up to 4,500 views of our local body, our Horowhenua District Council meetings. That was obviously not what management wanted to see. So they spent $100,000. That we had a handheld system where one woman just held a camera, pointed it around like that, was live streamed to Facebook. And we had incredible viewership and interest back in the council. $100,000 spent by management to put in another system and a different system of relaying it to the public, and now we're lucky if we get 10 to watch a meeting. And in my opinion, that is to stonewall information out of the building. In fact, it's not my opinion, that is what it is about.
So Michael, say if you are re-elected again, and I'm sure you have that confidence you will be, what's going to change in this next term? Do you still think or feel there's going to be conflict and controversy?
I think if people want to vote me back in as mayor, which I just love the amount of people that come and ask me to make sure I'm standing. I feel like I owe it to people to stand. Simple fact is that we have to have a different makeup in council. And that will make things a lot easier, because I am a minority mayor and have one follower in the sense of Ross Campbell. I'm the only mayor in the country that hasn't voted for their own annual plan, their long-term plan, or the rates strike, because I've never been afforded an independent audit of our own books. And when you take over a position of an organisation, that should just be a given. That's done. So I've never truly trusted the financial arrangements of our council. And
you think you can make an impact to change that?
Well, I have, in the sense that a number of things have been picked up by this chair, that independent chair. I believe that I would have expected even a higher level of his workmanship. But what I think I've done is made people aware that really the fight is really over who is in charge. Is it the elected mayor on the behalf of the people, or is it your only employee, the CE, who is unelected?
Good point.
And so the corporatisation to me is the bastardisation of local government. Well, my vision for the future is the manifesto that I had, and that is that we close our rubbish dump to avoid all of the the increase in catastrophic effects it's having on Hokio Stream, Hokio Beach, Lake Horowhenua, those sorts of things.
And move to...
Yes, no, what we need to do is to take it, to close it, move it off-site to Bonnie Glen for, say, a period of 3 years, so that we as an area can work out where we're going to put our own landfill, how we're going to be more responsible for our own rubbish and recycling, and then keep it in-house again. I don't want it dumped in someone else's backyard forever. We just need the space to do that, to formulate how we're going to finance it. The other thing that I'm really pushing for is a regular run commuter train system that will link up with Waikanae and hopefully will end out going through to Palmy. We can totally justify it here. We have the rail yards for it. It's got sidings, so if there's any trains having to cross, one can sit on a siding and so forth. We absolutely need it because a lot of the older population don't like driving on the roads anymore, and a lot of younger people can't afford cars. So in a sense, we've literally got a lot of our population that are imprisoned in this area because we have no public transport. Tourism is huge, and we must really focus on that more. GDP-wise to New Zealand, tourism has left farming, for example, for dead. And it leaves a lesser footprint if handled properly. Given that we have 2 state highways going through this area, we are in a prime position, and Foxton in particular is really, and Foxton Beach is really showing what tourism does for our area. The other thing is, my council were very averse to looking about anything to do with hemp. I'm still pushing that because hemp is a wonder product. It's not a drug. I'm not interested in medicalised marijuana. I'm talking about hemp fibre and hemp seeds. A lot of people wouldn't even know that you could make the equivalent of plastic bags out of hemp. You can make car bodies out of hemp. You can clothing, obviously. There is just so many, and the strength of it, instead of a steel strengthening rods, make them out of hemp. Hempcrete for your concrete. You can build a house, a breathing house out of hemp block. Now, why I really like that is the diversity of the product. If we have a good processing, a centralised processing plant that creates all of this, just imagine the job range and opportunity for garment manufacture, design. Then you've got the whole factory side of weaving it. If you're doing car bodies or fuselages or anything like that out of it, that's a whole different set, that's engineering. So to me, it's a no-brainer. And but I haven't been able to successfully get that through. Now, the other thing that's very critical for everything is that tangata whenua should be involved in everything right from the get-go. At the moment, my council has a great penchant for dividing hapu within an iwi with money. And I've seen this happen in a number of areas, and I have no beef with any of tangata whenua, mana whenua, hapu in this area. But I do not like what I perceive to be picking off to get things we want done as a council by picking a few off. We need open partnership and discussion, and it must benefit all, not benefit the few. And that's exactly how people see development. I'm not anti-development, but I want to know that in our town, if we're going to build all these thousands extra houses, and yet we're right on the borderline with water supply now, or availability, how are we going to feed those houses? Nothing that I'm trying to get through in terms of houses and compulsory water tanks, grey water tanks, nothing like that's happened.
How do you think the bypass is going to affect Levin?
I think it'll have a major positive effect, because we won't have the congestion of the main street to start with, which is horrendous. So people that are not really wanting to stop here, they will carry on anyway. What it's up to us about, and we can't do it because everything's in a tragic state, especially around our waterways. Our beach is reasonably fine, but it's up to us to have reasons for a family to want to catch the train up here, the regular run commuter train or that. We have brilliant parks in this area. Adventure Playground is something that my predecessor and all of that can be extremely proud of. Those sorts of things are great. Imagine what we could do if we had Lake Horowhenua fixed up, that we had Lake Papaitonga fixed up. It can be done relatively easy. The way we are doing it, my view as a council, by separating out hapu within an iwi, it just drags out the process. And we actually get nowhere. We spend lots and lots of money getting nowhere. And the Dutch inside me doesn't like wasting money on something. You've got to do the job once, do it right, do it properly, and have all the right people involved and not be in the business of divide and rule.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic vision for the district, and good luck with that. A lot on your plate, but we wish you every success for the future. And Michael Feyen, thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on Let's Chat, and anytime, anytime.